Thank you, Heather. Good afternoon, everybody. It is my pleasure to introduce our two panelists today, Jeff Ryan, who is a professor in the School of Geosciences at the University of South Florida, and his colleague and co-conspirator of this webinar, Mike Shackney, who's a geologist and works for SNME in Florida as well. They have a very interesting story to tell about how they started working together and what benefits they have seen from working together and how they have been helping students in their department engage with the workforce. So please take it away, Jeff and Mike.
Okay, Pranoti, thanks for having us. It's a little bit broader than you described. Mike and I are both just players in what has become a rather big sort of partnering effort that's gone on and developed over the years at USF. And what I'd like to do is really give you all a little bit of the history of that. So if you give me the next slide to just sort of show you where it all began. I don't know who's advancing. There we go. This is not an old relationship. Really, it's sort of the sort of seeds of this were sown in the spring semester of 1995, and were not sown by faculty. It was sown by the USF Geology Club, which was the undergraduate student geology organization, who were looking for some way to spend their student government money. And they actually came to one of my faculty in my department to ask about some possible ideas as they were interested in learning about employment opportunities, things of that nature. And this faculty member suggested the idea of, well, why don't you actually invite some of our alumni who are employers in to, have a discussion with them. And so they planned and held this networking reception to learn something about the local geoscience employment opportunities in the Florida region. And we got involved as faculty mostly by making phone calls, okay? Once the students decided to do this, they basically said, well, how do we get in touch with people? They said, okay, well, we could do that. And it was really mostly one faculty member, but there were several who had maintained connections with employers. We had some sort of limited efforts with some of the employers to working on some of our master's degree programs. We had just modified our master's degree program to more explicitly involve regional licensed professional geologists in the effort, mostly because the program was popular and we were sort of running out of staffing capabilities for it, and so getting the PGs in the region involved with it was a great way to essentially get more master's students out the door, which is something that those employers wanted. And so this particular faculty member, who I may eventually name, but I'm mostly going to keep him out of it, made a lot of contacts to bring people and encourage them to attend. And ultimately, when they held this event, there were about 40-odd students there, which was a pretty significant fraction of our undergraduate major at the time, and about 25 alumni who well, faculty were there too, but we sort of didn't matter. We were wallflowers. It was really the students and the alums. And the alums, most of whom were local employers in the environmental industry and local government and other sectors of the Florida environmental industry, who were really networking and getting to know each other. The side thing that came about with this event is that it got alumni together, and they started talking to each other as much as to the students, and they decided they just didn't want to not have that contact, and so they began to talk to this particularly network faculty member, and through his efforts and the efforts of several of our faculty, they sort of walked through this rather tortuous process of establishing a formal alumni society within the USF Alumni Association, and it took almost 2 years. So it was November 1997, actually over 2 years, by the time the U.S. Geology Alumni Society, or as we call it locally here, the GAS, was formally established as an enterprise. Okay, and so that was sort of the progeny of what has grown into the sort of relationship we have today. Next slide, please. So I'm going to do a little bit more timeline stuff here just to give you some idea of what they did and to talk about the culture of it, if you like. The very first event that the alumni held was a resume writing workshop for our students. They invited all the students, grad and undergrad, and they had a successful resume writing workshop for them. We provided the space. They did the deal here on campus. They established very quickly a fellowship for graduate students in geology. The Richard A. Davis Endowed Fellowship in Geology was initiated in 1999. It's now been going. It's quite a large endowment at this point. In 1998, they had their first big sort of public event, which was called the Geology Alumni Society Equipment Expo and Career Fair. It became locally famous, at least on campus it became locally famous. They held it next to the president's house. It was actually a real live demonstration of some of the things that these industries did. They basically killed the president's cable by drilling through a cable link on that event, so she got to know them really well. And it was the very first event they held. In fact, this has been going on since that day. So this is the longest standing event that the Alumni Society has been involved with that brings local employers onto the campus. They eventually established a Geology Alumni Society banquet in 2001. The 16th annual is happening at the end of this month. And they actually partnered with us in establishing the USF Geopark, which is a piece of unbuildable property here on the USF campus. It's unbuildable because there's a pile of nested sinkholes in there that people had drilled into and instrumented to try to understand a little bit about the local hydrology, and that is now a teaching and sort of outreach resource for the campus, and they were instrumental in making that happen. They also throw now twice a year rock breaker events. These are essentially networking events that are receptions for students, alumni, and faculty. And I list here my colleague Mike Shackney, who in 2003 became the chair of the Geology Alumni Society. I think he might have been the second chair. The first chair ran for the first 6 years, and then he stepped in. If you go ahead and click it one more time, I just want to comment a little bit about this. Okay, I'm talking about Alumni Society, and you can see there's a real theme to the programming that they chose to do, which is really all about student career preparation and readiness. This is not a group of people who spends a lot of time tailgating at football games. They do that now, but that's not mostly what they do, and that has always been part of their culture, has been to really be involved with our students, okay? And we encouraged this mostly by staying out of the way. We wanted them to be participating with our students, and so we got engaged basically at their request. We didn't push them to do things. They pushed us to do things, and we always obviously cooperated when they wanted to push to the degree that the university would let us. And I list Mike on here because this was really sort of a fundamental turning point in this organization as an organization. It started life as a traditional alumni society. It is really now an alumni and employer partner society. And it reached out early on to involve non-alumni employers in the effort. Mike is not an alumnus of USF. He is someone who has been an employer in our region for a long time. And so now they're involved at every level in the leadership, and it engages those people in the activities and leadership of the organization. And so from these early beginnings, I'm going to hand things off to Mike here for a few minutes to talk about what's going on now, and you can move the slide forward for him.
Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate that, and thanks again to UGA for giving me an opportunity to speak on this this very important topic and continuing to advance our relationship with academia and industry. It's where geosciences is going in advancing and helping the students prepare for careers. It's very important to me. I graduated from Wright State up in Dayton, Ohio, so I did my graduate work, and they had a very close relationship with the oil industry. And one of the things that sort of inspired me and I always thought about was they had an advisory committee of the oil companies that would come in every year and talk with the faculty and speak with the students that would help the students understand and equally as important the faculty understand what the oil industry was looking for. So that was sort of where, you know, that sort of was sort of the basis of the thoughts here. So when I was asked to step in as chairman for the GAS back in 2003, the idea was to advance, you know, that partnership and understanding that the wheels of academia turn very slowly for the most part. it was one of those things where we had to step into it carefully, but also with some consistency as well. So what we did is created an agenda of events throughout the year that push those events. The resume writing course, the expo event, the banquet, panelists. We'd have panel discussions where professionals would come in and talk about careers in geoscience. But equally as important, and even more important, is starting the process of showing the students what the industry expectations were. What happened out there when we first started it? Most of the students didn't know what a PG was, a professional geology licensure was. They didn't understand how to get there, what that meant, and it really wasn't in the academia's purview to talk to them about that. But it's very important in industry for that to be the case, for them to know that. Is it more important to have a master's degree or versus a PhD? So we had people speaking on those types of subjects in the panels and the colloquiums. So the students started at that point to get engaged. So that was one part. The other part was to start to, when we had our alumni meetings, was to really run it a little bit more like a business meeting. So tightened up on things like the agenda, and it was a very quick agenda. If you can see the start time and the end time here, we ran it very quickly. A lot of things covered, but very quickly, so that and then we invited students and to be there, and so that they could see how it was run, and the open conversation. So again, it was all about opening what was historically sort of a big black box to the students, opening that so they could see what was really going on, and how they could become more knowledgeable about the business world that they will eventually be getting into for the most part. So, I mean, as you can see in this agenda, very typical things. We have a treasury report to look at. We talked about the different events that were coming up. We had folks that were responsible for those events. But the other thing we also had was we had the geology club representatives there, and the graduate society of students there as well. And those individuals were required to report on what was going on in their respective organizations. And then we, as professionals sitting around the table and faculty, the professionals would weigh in on that. If they were doing some sort of a fundraiser, we would give them some ideas on how to make that better, better effective for them. If they wanted to have an opportunity to visit a working, business, then we would set those up. We would help them set that up as well. And so, as you can see in this agenda, it's designed and completely wrapped around integrating and engaging the students with the with local industry and vice versa. So you could click on the next, I think something. So yeah, you can just click through those if you want. So that's basically what I just said for the most part, and it does that very effectively. On the last one that just came up, what I think, taking maybe a couple of steps back here, when I first became involved with the university back in 1994, I was an employer that was looking for staff, so I went to the local university, which was USF, and I met with the same faculty member that Jeff had alluded to earlier in the conversation. And he told me about the internship, the non-thesis master's internship that had been going on at the university for a few years. And so I got engaged with the university through that vehicle by having students working with me doing their internships. And so that kind of what got me involved with the university. From that, and as we moved into the later years, what's come out of that is sort of the next maturation, which is a more formalized program, the professional geology science master's program, which really is designed to educate the student in the direction of a professional a career, whether that is in environmental consulting or regulatory or industry or mining or anything like that. It's designed to provide exposure to the student in the in a variety of industry career opportunities. So with that, if you could go to the next slide. Here's the curriculum, and the next course, which I'll talk about in just a second, which is very brand new. But what happened with this first course is this Introduction to Professional Geoscience. As you can see, it's a little hard to see, but if you look at the syllabus, the things that are covered are very much things that a young geoscience professional is going to want to know sometime in their career. And I for one would say that if I'd have known some of this stuff at the beginning of my career, it would have been a whole lot easier on some of the stuff that I had to learn, sort of the hard way to some extent. But as you can see, if you look at these, both of these courses are facilitated by faculty, but are taught by professional geoscience professionals in the industry. And as you can see, on this one on the left, the first course is a networking event, and it's designed to engage the students with the local industry leaders. It's held off campus. They have to go around and talk to the different employers that are there, introduce themselves, talk about what they're doing, and have an opportunity to engage with them, and because that's part of a class project that they will be doing, because they will then select a mentor, which will be one of those employers that are at that event, and work on a project where that employer will help them through that project. And then comes a series of classes that address project management, communications, business development, scoping for projects, business and ethics, liability avoidance. You can read them on down the list. The whole thing is designed to get them an exposure to the many different elements that they will see as a business person in the field of, in the geoscience industry. So that's going on since 2010, and the agenda's changed a little bit here and there. We tried to sort of make it a little more streamlined this last year or so, but the students, when we first did it, I think there were, I don't know, I think there were 5 or 6 students. Now I think there's 15, 16, 17 students in this class, and so it's grown tremendously. So this in 2015, and this was a graduate level class. In 2015, the thought was, well, what are we doing to help the students who's just declared their major to get an idea of what the geology, the professional world has in store for them? I mean, you say you're going to be a geologist. Well, what does that mean? What kind of careers are available to you? So this preparing for a career in geology course was put together, and again facilitated by faculty, taught by professional geoscience in the industry. Some individual, some in panels, but again, as you can see the syllabus, you can clearly see that the different things that are touched on are things that a young student or a person who's just starting out or thinks that they want to be a geologist, what's in store for them. So I think you can, let's see.
Click once.
Yeah, click once. So both of these courses, just as a summary, what they do is they introduce the student to the broad sense of all the things that are available to them in the geoscience industry, but also provide for continuous professional networking opportunities, because every class they're having a chance to engage with those of us that are in the field doing the work right now. So everybody on this list, for the most part, that you see under the teachers or panel or instructors, we're all employers to some extent. So that's a pretty good exposure, throughout their college career. Okay, next slide.
Yeah. And I guess Mike and I are going to have our own perspectives on this, and I will add one thing to what Mike said about that introduction to professional geoscience course, because it really sort of crystallizes the way the relationship works now. That course came into being, or if you like, was provoked into being by interactions at a Rockbreaker event, where our employers were talking to some of our younger undergraduates who really didn't seem to have a clue about what it is they needed to do in terms of what the industry options or possibilities were. Those employers brought that to the faculty. We had a long discussion about the best strategy, and that course really was the brainchild that came out, and it's averaging 40 odds. It's averaging between 25 and 30 students an offering. So it's it's a brand new course, but it's already extremely popular. And that's really that's sort of the sum of the way it goes now here, 18 years later, with regard to this relationship we have with our employers. It's definitely a back and forth constructive dynamic. They talk to us about issues they see there. We sometimes bring them issues. It really is, we're a little less, as a faculty, hands off of the alumni and the employers than we were maybe originally, but that's because they're very forthright about what they want, and we're really all working in the same direction. And so I use the term down here, normal business, and it really is sort of normal business for us. The feedback that we get from the employers, both our alums and those who are simply engaged with us as geoscience employers, is central to what we do now at pretty much every level of our curriculum. So I don't know what you want to think. You can say what you like, Mike.
Well, and I agree. I think some interesting, statistics may be worthwhile here. When the Geology Alumni Society banquet was first happened in 2001, there was roughly, and I was at that one, there was roughly 50, maybe 60 people there. Mm-hmm. It was in sort of a disorganized room. It was sort of a disorganized sort of a thing. We talked about a bunch of stuff, but now it's held at the Alumni Center on campus. Mm-hmm. It is 170 plus. It's sold out for the last 5+ years. There are students that there's about 50 or better students that are there. Their tables are all sponsored by employers, and students are integrated with the employers at the tables. We have some fantastic speakers that come in. And the different departments within the department, the professors talk about whether they're on campus or whether they videotape it in, talk about what they're doing. So there's a state of the department discussion. So there is a complete interaction of the students and the employers and the university at this banquet. Happens every year. It's a really spectacular event, and it's come an extremely long way since 2001. The Alumni Society for the university is very proud of what the GAS has created, and we've won awards on how we handle our alumni society, our organization, how we keep our books, all of those things. So it's really come a long way, and it's a testament to the leadership and at both the faculty level and at the employer level as well. So that's one thing. The other thing is that I didn't mention this, but the fact that those two courses that I mentioned are now on the regular curriculum is a testament to to the university's support of this kind of a program and their connection to the community, and how important it is that the community is engaged with what the university is doing and vice versa. So the fact that those two courses are now a staple of the geology coursework, both at the undergraduate and at the graduate level, I think is a testament of the maturation of the program.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So
next slide, I think.
Yeah, and so we got some pointers on the next slide here.
So what, just some things, from my perspective. One of the things that helped us get going early is having good leadership, both at the alumni, but also at the leadership, obviously, at the department chair level. We had to lean on the department chair quite a bit to help get things going. And I don't mean that in a bad way. What I mean is that we needed a voice to the faculty to start to talk about the things that the Alumni Society was doing, so that the students became interested and started to engage. So that we needed the support of the department chairman and the leadership there to make that happen. I think promoting a business style approach is important. It shows the students that it's serious, and because business is serious and the real world's serious, and it gets them their first opportunity to take a glimpse into that arena. So oftentimes you'll see a student, you'll be in his senior year, or her will be in their senior year, and they have no idea what the real world holds for them in what they have been studying. And this is what we wanted to do, what we could to give them that vision into and what the future may look like. It's a different paradigm. So it doesn't happen very quickly. It's a culture change. It's something that you have to work on and stay consistent. You'll have your pushback people, of course, but I think that at the end of the day, the culture will be something that the whole group will be proud of what they've been able to create. Encourage your faculty to buy in and on the partnering concept by thinking about how they're teaching their students, and are they connecting the real world to the theory. They're teaching the theory. Are they bringing in real world applications, whether it's in the lab or whether it's just talking about certain the different theories that they have taught year in and year out. Are they making sure those theories are being applied in sort of a fresh way as much as possible? Again, keeping the students' minds active. Financial connections are always very important. Sponsorships, I certainly encourage, and there's no reason why employers cannot sponsor events. The university does not put on those rock breaker events. That is put on by the employers. The employers provide the sponsorship. Well, GAS puts it on, but the money for it comes from the employers to do that. So that's important. The scholarships. We had a field geology camp scholarship. It started off as a scholarship and turned into more formal funding after that. But that was started by some donations. And then, of course, the fellowship. So financial connection is important and can be used to force it to move forward. I think having the students understand the expectations of industry is important. One of the last pieces that we teach in the careers course, careers in geology course, is just that. I mean, we go through some very specific expectations what the industry is expecting and what you should expect out of the industry. And then, of course, the last part is that there's always that being fresh on stuff. So the department needs to continue to listen to the community and think of new ways to help develop the students, so that as industry changes, the students are right there with it. So when they graduate, they're ready to go for the most part.
Okay, if we can click it one more time. Okay. I have a few comments as a chair in recovery for the department chairs in the audience, as I'm sure there's going to be some how-to questions. There's things you can do as a chair. You're a facilitator, and so you can facilitate connections. You can find the opportunities to help your alumni connect with your students and also with each other. If you're trying to start this kind of an enterprise, this is something you can do, and it was not just a single faculty member, but an enlightened department chair who actually helped this go forward back in the day when we started it. Very important, to make this go, you need a hero, and that hero is not you. You have a lot on your plate as a department chair, but you probably also know who it is in your unit that has, for whatever reason, maintained connections with a lot of your alums, who for whatever reason is well connected to your employers. There's your hero. The thing I will say as a chair, and it was something I acted on, if this is a worthwhile thing to do, if it is valuable, it's worth assigned time. At this point, the faculty member that Mike and I are talking about, probably 3/4 of his teaching assignment is actually associated with this partnership in some way or form. And it has been incredibly productive for us, and it's very satisfying for him. So it's a win-win all around. Sometimes you do have to throw tantrums. You have to throw strategic tantrums. Mike mentioned the field scholarship thing. We had weird and unexplained pushback from our foundation on this for a long time. I eventually, 2 days before Christmas, had to try to have a come to Jesus with these people and realized when I got them in a room, it was just language. They didn't understand that we were just talking about a scholarship that would pay some of their tuition. They thought we were trying to give money to students, and there's all sorts of problems with that. You can't do that. I said, well, that's not what we're trying to do. We're just trying to pay the tuition. And I said, oh, yeah, we can do that. I was real smiley, but I wanted to strangle all of them personally at that point. But, that's sometimes you have to do that for them, because that really got it over the hump in terms of making that happen. And the last thing, really important, you say thank you. They don't have to do this for you. So you have to be gracious. You have to be full of gratitude about it. Say thank you all the time. Whatever they want to do for you, and don't say do this to them. Okay? They have their own jobs. They have their own careers. They have their own priorities. It's got to be a symbiosis. And so, be grateful for the things that they will do for you. And with that, I think we're finished with our slides, and we can take some questions.
All right. Thank you so much. I'll go back to your last slide here.
Mm-hmm.
We do have some questions from the audience that have come in. The first question is, who pays for the activities that take place? Either Mike or Jeff.
Mike, well, I can. Okay. I can. The activities are often self-sustaining. The banquet, for example, there are donations made to the fellowship funds, and there are operating dollars. A small part of that money actually goes to sort of running the banquet. In other words, people are buying tables. They're actually buying meals, and so they populate the tables, and they basically pay for the catering. A big plus for them, the Alumni Society some years ago, is when they actually built the Alumni Center, and they didn't have to pay for space because the Alumni Center provides the space for this kind of event, and so that has improved their profit margin on this for the fellowship quite a lot. A lot of the other events, I think, Mike, you mentioned that for things like the Rock Breaker, those were actually donations from industry.
They are. Someone will pay for the food, someone will pay for the venue, but mostly it's paid for by industry. And the expo, the university donates the location, but anything else beyond that is paid by the local folks who bring their equipment on. And then, the other thing that we do is, the GAS has a graduation a social event every semester, and that is also paid for by the employers, and GAS actually pays for part of that, and then there's also usually a sponsor for that as well. So
that's actually a place where we tend to partner directly, because we can actually use some foundation dollars at the department level to helps put some money on the table for that, and we've done that over the last couple of years, because as our enrollments have grown, we've actually had to have these events after every academic semester, which means 3 times a year, and we've had a lot of students. So really, that's really become a hand-in-hand partnership.
Awesome. And about how many? Oh, I have another question that kind of follows that. About how many undergraduate students do you have participate?
At USF now?
Yes.
Last number I saw was 169 undergraduate majors.
Okay.
And about 75 grad students, probably 50 PhDs, and 25 masters at this point.
Wow. Wonderful. Excellent. And can any of this work be done outside of the university setting? Say, for instance, if you don't have a university to team with?
Some of the things that they do are outside the setting. When we do one of the events that GAS is involved with has been the Professional Geoscience Masters program has a public presentation event that the graduates actually present their work, and that's held at our local water management district every year.
Excellent.
And then the other thing, like I said, the networking event is held in an off-site location as well.
Now, have other departments on your campus, have they ever adapted your programs or your courses or any of the work that you've done?
I'll answer to that. There has been a lot of curiosity about this. Obviously, we're a little different from some of the other sciences in the geosciences because we sort of directly feed a profession. Chemistry and biology on our campus, at least, largely feed pre-meds, and so they don't have quite the same network. But there has been interest from a number of departments. When I was chair attending the banquet, I would basically put an invite out to other department chairs who wanted to come and said, look, I'm going to buy a table, so why don't you just have some seats at the table? And I got folks from anthropology, psychology, communication, and several other departments over the years who actually came just to see what was going on. I don't know that they've necessarily, because every department is going to be a little bit different. Its relationship to its alumni is necessarily going to be different, and its relationship to employers is going to be different. And so they're going to have any unit's going to have to find its own way a little bit on this. But certainly there's been curiosity. I will say that.
Okay, great. Now, what did you have to do to sell these courses to your college curriculum committee, or for the undergraduate course?
Basically, we have the liberty to teach things as a selected topics to start with, which we just did. And so the first offering of the course was just as a free elective, and it still got 42 students in it.
Wow.
And we built it into a curriculum revision that's undergoing final approval this semester. There has been zero pushback from the curriculum committees. I think there's an understanding. Certainly in Florida, we have a political system that really does look at universities as career preparation to a great degree. And so when we put a course in that's entitled "Preparing for a Career in the Geosciences," there's really no resistance to that.
Yeah, I would imagine.
So they and there's really not a lot of sort of drill down into what's going on in the course. I would say we're a known quantity on campus in terms of this relationship. So when for example, University Undergraduate Council sees a course like this, it says, oh yeah, it's geosciences. They have this crazy partnership, and it works for them.
That's awesome. That's great. Now, what kind of midterm and final exams do you give?
Well, In those courses?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Mike, I don't know if you have a little bit more info on what's going on in the graduate course. I know in the undergraduate course it's really a series of writing assignments through the entire semester. They actually have to reflect upon, when they hear these panels and network with these people, they have to reflect upon what they've learned at each step of the way. And so I've been getting essays, short essays, sort of one paragraph things from these students. I did one of these panels early in the game, and I've gotten all of their feedback from it, and I think other faculty are getting that too, and they were involved in panels. I think the employers get that too. The faculty member is very religious about trying to keep the information lines open between his panelists and sort of teachers and the students. So.
Okay.
So I think most of the grading in that is really how you're completing this, and what are you getting out of this by the end of it.
And then in the graduate course, like at the beginning, I talked about the students are matched up through their selection and through a mutual agreement on being matched up with a mentor, and from that comes a project. And there's a variety of interviews that have to happen. So between the student and the employer, and they work on a fairly basic kind of a project, so that there's some real world familiarity with what between the two.
Mm-hmm.
And that gets turned in sometime in the middle of the semester, I think. And then there is a final exam at the end, which is just basically a series of essays and a culmination of all of the items that are on the agenda.
Okay. Now we have some folks in the audience who wanted to ask if you would be willing to share your outline and the context of both your courses that you've talked about.
What I will do is talk to the instructor of record of those courses. I suspect he would be happy to share them. He shared them with me, so I can see if he wants to provide, for example, a sanitized syllabus or something like that that you all can simply post. The thing about them, I will say, is that of course they're very regional, right? Because the folks that you can get in quickly, the folks you can get in easily for panel discussions, for a course like the Professional Geology course or the Introduction to Careers course, are folks who are local, and they're and so there's a real local flavor to some of it. When there's an opportunity for somebody to come in from afar, we have some alumni now who are at ExxonMobil and some of the oil industry and some of the other oil patch companies. And they will often show up for the banquet or the expo or one of these bigger events, and so often enough they'll try to tailor a session of one or the other of these courses around that, so that these people can participate, and they're usually quite happy to. But that may not always necessarily show up in the syllabus.
Right, I see. Now, this partnership must also be of great interest to your USF Development or Advancement Office. Do you have any comments on that?
I'll give my perspectives, and Mike can talk from what he sees there, because he may have, as chair of the GAS, he may have had more directly interaction with them. It's a weird relationship with the development office. They're often, our development office at least, and I'm not sure how typical it is, they're often very cagey about their interfaces with potential donors. And we have this really casual relationship with our employers, and many of whom are our alums, and there's constant correspondence, right? And so I can remember a great example. I had somebody from development while I was chair call me. They were doing a trip to Houston. They were going to be meeting with some recent alums, and they wanted me to give them like this really detailed update on what's happened in the department and what new things have you done, and they basically want me to write them like a 10-page like summary of everything that's gone on. And I'm saying, Houston, you say it's a recent alum. Who is it? I basically just asked him, who is it? And they didn't want to tell me. So I said, well, hang on. We know all of them, and I just named off the names. He said, oh yeah, her. And I say, she was here in 2008, she was in last year, here's what she needs to know. And they just sort of, oh, you know, it's like they're completely not used to that sort of casual familiarity that we have with our employers. And I'm not sure they've quite adapted to it yet, because you still get this sort of odd interaction with the folks who are out there trying to raise money. I'm sort of surprised personally that they haven't been much more explicit about taking advantage of some of us who have been really involved in this relationship, because obviously those are the people that the alumni know and could probably be much more effective at, you know, talking up a particular event or an opportunity.
Okay.
I didn't have much interaction with the USF Development and Advancement Office. I will only comment that off of what Jeff stated, is that the relationship that we as an industry and employers created with USF is extremely, I think from what I've heard, is unique in that it kind of goes against the grain of sort of the institutional approach on how things are done. I know that you know, the challenges we had with Foundation were a part of that, and it wasn't that they didn't eventually get it. It was just not the way things were done, and they were sort of say, well, you have to do this, and this way, or we can't do it. Well, and employers, our position is, what do you mean? Why can't I just give this money and let's move forward? And I think there's where you have to have some very good interaction between. There's where the leadership of the department has to be able to work to sort of work the system. Probably didn't say that very well, but so that some of this stuff gets done, because the employers just don't understand how the university works behind the scenes, and so when you're dealing with money, the university wants it done a certain way because they have their ways, and plus they have rules and restrictions on what they have to do. So it's not just their way; it's what they have to do for the checks and balances. And employers, you know, we just kind of want to move forward with stuff. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, another question. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I think Mike said that's you know, fundamentally we are a state university, which means we're a state agency, and there are both rules that have to be followed, but also sort of sort of statewide business practices that we have to put up with that are quite different from what a consulting firm puts up with, or even another government organization. I mean, there are as many sort of, really, you'd have to do that kind of moments with our local water management district, which is a regional you know, governmental authority, as we do with consulting firms. It's just, you know, there's a set of rules and you follow them, and so communicating that and then sort of navigating that is something that department chairs end up de facto. If you have this kind of thing going on, you end up doing a lot of that.
Right. Okay. So we have one last question, and it is most of your industry and alumni involvement related to the oil and gas industry or to environmental industry or any other industry? How would you describe it?
Okay. I can put a little bit of a historical spin on this. Certainly early on, it was very much the local environmental industry, which is both consulting and regulatory. We had a lot of people involved in the local Florida Water Management District. We had a lot of people involved with the Department of Environmental Protection here in Florida, and there were a lot of folks in local and regional consulting firms. And they're still the core of the sort of active employers, because they're the ones who are close by. But it has now expanded to include folks from across the country. Currently, on the Alumni Society board, we have people from Colorado and Houston, folks who are, you know, not from the Tampa Bay area. They're still in Florida, but not from the Tampa Bay area. It's spread out a good bit, and I think there has been a conscious effort to sort of reach out to that broader community to engage everybody by the Alumni Society, and and that's something that the department has really applauded, because there's folks, we don't just train folks for the Florida environmental industry, we train folks for everywhere, and they, and they do go everywhere. And they got, particularly the more recent generation of alums, they've really gotten used to that relationship that exists between our employers and us. And so when they become employers, when they become part of the industry, they want to keep that up. And so now for example, the current Alumni Society board is really all the folks who've come along since things began, and are now in their sort of middle and upper management positions.
That's fantastic. Are there any other questions from the audience? We have time for about one more. So one more that's basically related to that. Now, what do your current students say about these events and the relationships in the courses? Does it help them land a job in the workforce? Have you done any post-evaluations or anything of that nature?
Does it help individual students get employed? I think it probably ultimately does.
Okay.
We haven't done a rigorous evaluation. That's actually something we're looking at, how best to do that. Mm-hmm. It's a weird situation because we have a lot, compared to many departments, we have a lot more informal information about what our grads have done, simply because we're in contact with their employers, many of whom are grads as well. And so we sort of get this sort of constant feedback. We haven't really codified it to the degree that I would like, speaking as someone who does science education and cares about assessment. And so it's something that we're looking at and working on, and it's something I hope that now that I'm a chair in recovery, I can actually devote more time to.
Absolutely. Well, I think
on the local level, I think that it has helped students land jobs or have summer work or get that the beginning of their career started. We brought on several folks here at SNME and at the previous company I was working with, as permanent hires. I know that, of course, Exxon there's two folks that went to Exxon that were hired, were better prepared for what that company was looking for as well. So I think that it absolutely does, and I think that if we can get to a point where we can actually start doing some statistics on it, it'll show some pretty good progress over the last 10 or so years.
Yeah, absolutely. And is this between how has the setup encouraged any research collaborations between industry and faculty?
There's a lot of there has been a variety of different kinds of informal industry support of faculty research, and particularly student research with faculty. We have a big group that does environmental geophysics and field geophysics, sort of land-based, and there's equipment that bounces back and forth. And so some of the local companies have equipment. They'll loan it to instructors in courses here, or loan it for student research, loan it for faculty or student research, and vice versa, because we have things that they can benefit from. And when it's involving education for students, it's okay for us to actually sort of do that. And so there has been some sort of in-kind support of that kind. I can't speak to sort of research hypotheses and ideas as well as some of the folks, particularly in our hydrogeology program over the years. I think there certainly has been stuff going on there for a long time. But obviously the perspectives are very different, because anything that's involved in a sort of graduate thesis or dissertation is going to end up being a public document of a kind, a published thesis or a dissertation, and there are some times where proprietary issues from the companies prevent some of that from happening. And so there's been some. But it's often enough it's in-kind support, and it's sort of it's not necessarily there hasn't really been financing of anything.
Right.
Well, one of the things I'll just add really quickly, and I've got just a few minutes left, is that the internship program, the projects, the non-thesis project that is assigned is an agreement between the academic advisors and the employer on what that project is going to be. In other words, it's not just your basic, company type project. As a very quick example, the intern that is working with us right now is doing research on iron fouling for remediation systems and doing a chemical analysis of the groundwater so that there can be a more predictive way to determine what kind of iron fouling or fouling is going to occur in a remediation system. So there is that is research that benefits the industry, but also can go forth from a water chemistry and geochemical perspective. That can, there's lots of different questions that can come up and advance that through the years with different students.